Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast. I'm Mike Evans, and just when you start to think maybe the Avalanche are past the rough times, they go out and submit a performance like they did in Nashville the other day and get beat 5-1. Once again, bringing up some of the questions that surround this hockey team as this is trade deadline week. So what happens? What did that loss in Nashville show us in terms of what the Avs need to do? What do you hope that the Avalanche do? For me, as I look at this team right now, boy, what are they? What do I see when I see the Avalanche? Well, first of all, let's take a look around the entire Western Conference. There's no team that I feel has separated themselves from the pack in the Western Conference. So really, it's almost like you could take 5 or 6 teams in the West, throw a dart at all of them, hit one, and that could easily be the team that ends up winning the Western Conference. So the good news for the Avalanche is they're part of that mix. They're part of that group of half a dozen teams that could easily, if things break the right way, win the West. So it's not like the Avs are in any kind of dire straits when it comes to how far they might be able to go in the playoffs. The only problem is that if you're part of that pool of teams, you could easily find yourself knocked out in, let's say, the second round, and your season is prematurely over. So as I look at the Avalanche right now, that's the kind of team I see right now. A flawed team, but still a good team, and a team that's capable of getting hot and going on an extended playoff run. But do you want to leave it to chance that that's what happens, that they just get hot and that things bounce their way? Or would you like to see them stack things in their favor to be able to go make not only a deep playoff run, but win a Stanley Cup? If they're going to do that, then they have to make some moves at the trade deadline. Here's the problem. It's what kind of move are you going to make that's going to be a real difference maker? Sure, you can go out and get a depth defenseman. You can get a winger that projects as a third or fourth line winger or center help in the third or fourth lines. But if you're looking, or a backup goalie, that kind of thing, an upgrade at backup goalie. But if you're looking at something that's going to really, really change the look of this team, is there a major move to be made out there? And quite honestly, when I look at the amount of players that are being mentioned, the name of players that are being mentioned, especially at what I think is the most important position to fill, that second line center, quite frankly, there's really nobody out there that I look at and say, man, I would really like to have him. And he's worth giving up a lot for. That he'll come in and really make a difference at like that second line center position. The names we've been hearing, the Casey Middlestats, the Adam Henriques, the Laughlins, the players of that ilk. Sorry, none of them I point to and say that's the guy that if you bring him to the Avalanche and slot him in there as a second line center, then you got the difference maker. You got the guy that's going to take the Avalanche from being one of those 6 teams in the West that could easily win the West to being the team to win in the West. Now, that doesn't mean things can't change. And this is where it gets interesting. Because we started talking about the idea of Sidney Crosby several weeks ago. And it was sort of in the, hey, we can all wish, right? It'd be really cool if Sidney Crosby became available. But now you're starting to kind of wonder a little bit, because you can't help but look at what's happening to Pittsburgh and think maybe, just maybe, Sidney Crosby could shake free. Let's look at what's happening to Pittsburgh. They decided to bring back their aging core to take another run at this. Well, that didn't work out. Over the weekend, they blew a 3-1 lead to Calgary in the third period and lost. Followed up the next night, got blown out by Edmonton 6-1. They've lost 3 in a row, and they've fallen 10 points behind the second wild card spot in the East. I'm here to tell you, this late in the season, you're down by 10 points. It is highly, highly, highly unlikely that you're going to be able to make up that ground and sneak back into the playoffs. It's possible, but unlikely. So if you're Pittsburgh, this weekend may have just clinched probably what you've already been talking about at some point, but this weekend clinched the idea that we're not going to be a playoff team. And do we want to continue to move forward with this aging core, or do we want to use this core as a means of speeding up our rebuild? Sidney Crosby he's 36 right now, will turn 37 next season. Guy's still playing at an obscenely high level. 59 games, 63 points, 32 goals, 31 assists. Still an elite player. What if Sidney Crosby becomes available? Now, all of a sudden, now you've got that player out there that you look at and say, that's a difference maker. That's the kind of guy that if we bring him into our team, we become a Stanley Cup favorite. And I think but I think there's enough smoke out there. Elliot Friedman from Hockey Night in Canada did a podcast on Monday, actually right before we did this one, in which he speculated and talking to people around the league, the sense is the Avalanche are going to do something big. Big is not Casey Middlestat. Big is not Adam Henrique. Big is somebody that, quite frankly, nobody's talking about yet. Big is a name that hasn't entered the ever-churning NHL rumor mill. Big is Sidney Crosby. And I thought it was interesting. Again, this just kind of adds to the whole, if there's some smoke, there's some fire. Paul Bissonnette, who does a great job with the TNT broadcast, also, of course, with the Spit and Chicklets podcast, he sent out a tweet this weekend. Quote, imagine wasting the season Sid just had. That's the biggest joke. Send him to Colorado to play with McKinnon. Now we're talking. Yeah, now we're talking. Boy, that's you want to talk about replacing Nazem Kadri? That's replacing Nazem Kadri. That's getting a second line center. And then that leads to what would you be willing to give up? What do you want? Because, see, if Sidney Crosby becomes available, now you have really, I think, cemented the idea that we're in a championship window and we're going for it. And if that means giving up a first-round pick, if that means giving up the best player in your system, if that means giving up Bo Byram, you do it. You do it. And you don't think twice. You do it if that's the asking price. Because if somebody like a Sidney Crosby becomes available, how can you not be first in line, hand up? What does it take to make a deal? It just makes too much sense. It makes so much sense on so many levels. One is that the Avs are exactly the kind of team that if you're Pittsburgh and you're going to decide to do something as seismic as trading Sidney Crosby, the face of your franchise for so long, it's got to be with the idea that you can sell it to your fan base. And I think your fan base would be okay with this, by the way, that, hey, listen, we're Sidney Crosby, we love him. He's always going to be a Penguin. He'll forever be a Penguin. But this is an opportunity for us to help our rebuild. Plus, we're sending Sid to a place where he has a chance to win a cup again. And I think Penguin fans would love that. Would love the idea of saying, hey, yeah, Sid, go get it. You've earned it. You've earned the right. It's not going to happen here. Shades of when it happened with Ray Bourque in Boston. Now, difference is Bourque hadn't won a cup yet. Crosby obviously has. But you're still talking about same stages of their career that they're aging to the point where the rebuild that's facing their current team is going to take too long. They're not going to be part of the next great Penguin team, just like Bourque wasn't going to be part of the next great Bruins team. So it made sense. It made sense for the team to get as much as they could for that player, and it made sense because the fan base, first in Boston with Bourque, in this case with Pittsburgh and Crosby, would look at and say, go to Colorado. Go win a Stanley Cup. Go be reunited with your buddy Nathan McKinnon. Go win a cup, and we'll be able to root for you along the way. I think it makes a lot of sense. So it's fun to talk about, but I do believe the reason it's worth talking about is because it represents the kind of move that I think the Avalanche should try to make if it's possible versus the move that they probably should resist making. as much as I want the Avalanche to try to maximize this championship Stanley Cup window that they're in, I don't want them to be so reckless to the point that they're making bad deals. You know, I'm always one that when we talk about quarterbacks in the NFL draft, don't be one of those stupid NFL teams that overdraft a quarterback just because you have a need for a quarterback and you go out and you recklessly spend a first-round pick that's probably destined to fail. It's the same thing here with the Avs. Just because I know they have a need to fill with their second-line center doesn't mean they should go overpay for a second-line center out there that, quite frankly, isn't going to be what they need. And it doesn't make sense to give up valuable assets for the future to bring in somebody that's just not going to move the meter. It's not that I'm anti making a trade. It's not that I'm against giving up draft pick. It's not that I'm against giving up top guys in your system. It's not that I'm even against giving up young talent on your NHL roster. It's got to be for the right kind of person. If a Sidney Crosby or a player, not necessarily of his same stature, but you know what I mean, somebody that hasn't been talked about yet in the NHL rumor mill, shakes free, comes free this week, what are you willing to give up to go after him? If that's the case, if it's that kind of player, then it makes a whole lot of sense. So we shall see. This loss to Nashville for the Avalanche once again showed that there's definitely some holes to fill on this hockey team. And the holes that do exist on this team, they're not so fatal that they can't still have a really good playoff run. They can, but when you're in a championship window like the Avs are with the core that they have, I just don't think that you want to leave anything to chance. I don't think you want to go into the playoffs where you're just kind of counting on everything clicking, everything bouncing your way, everybody going on a heater at the same time. I don't think that's a smart way to do business. So if you have a chance, and again, it takes two to tango in making a deal like this. If a player or players shake free this week that we just haven't been hearing about, that I hope the Avalanche are uber aggressive at going after them. Because right now the players that we are talking about, kind of an underwhelming pool of players for me. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if there's more to this Sidney Crosby stuff. I think it bears watching. I really do. Because if you're Pittsburgh, you have to have come to the realization this weekend that it's not happening this year. So what do we do? How do we start the rebuild? What are we prepared to do? Are we prepared to do something drastic like moving Sidney Crosby? It will be fun to watch. Going to be a lot of rumors over the course of the week. We'll be here to talk about all of them. We'll gather again later in the week to see what's transpired, what seems to be imminent, and if there are any real juicy rumors out there involving the Avalanche. Until then, enjoy the week, enjoy your hockey, enjoy the NHL hockey rumor mill, and it's going to be fun. We'll see you later in the week.